I didn't make that
Oh,
connection, Matt. That's cool. The one for the boys. Yeah, that makes.
You
really?
never made that connection?
Well, I
Jake, that's got to be the stupidest thing you've ever said, man.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to this 51st episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And on today's episode, we're going to be diving into another one of the Beach Boys solo albums, Brian Wilson's self-titled debut, which many fans refer to as Brian Wilson '88. So, as usual with our album discussion episodes, we're first going to go over a bit of the history behind the record and talk about what was going on in Brian's life around the time. And then we will discuss each of the tracks one by one and share our own thoughts and opinions on them. And then to close out the episode, we'll go over a few of the outtakes and B-sides that Brian recorded in the late 80s, including some of his collaborations with his old songwriting partner, Gary Usher. So joining me tonight, I have my good friends Riley, Matt, and Nate. So as always, I'm excited to have you guys here, and I can't wait to discuss this record with you guys. So before we get into some of the history and background surrounding Brian Wilson '88, do you guys have any general thoughts or feelings about the record that you wanted to share?
Uh, I feel like with this one, and as with a lot of albums that could be classified as a Brian solo album, you kind of have that like moment of clarity where everything kind of just clicks with you. And I was pretty lucky. I don't know about you guys, that kind of happened a little early on. One of my first couple listens. I always knew Love and Mercy from the movie, but in terms of just the rest of the material on the album, it just clicked with me at some random point. I can't even mark when, and it's always been a favorite for me. I think that this is one example of just Brian just kind of coming back into like his songwriting best and having some very melodic moments and great production on it. Although I know the production is pretty not controversial. It's like decide you either like it or you don't.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I've always enjoyed this one, and I think it's Brian coming back into his best, just for better or for worst, coming back into his best.
I personally think this is a very melodic record. I've seen that people have described this as Pet Sounds '88. I think that that is a fairly apt description, but I know you kind of it's more synth heavy and stuff like that. I think it's immaculately produced. I read that apparently, according to Wikipedia, this record cost over $1 million. Sounds like it because it sounds really good. Yeah, I really quite enjoy it. There's a lot of really enjoyable cuts on here. I think Brian sounds really good on it, and definitely you can hear like a lot of like Beach Boysy arrangements and harmonies and stuff. So I think it's a really, really enjoyable listen.
To
Nate.
me, this album sounds like if you took the grandiosity of Phil Spector's work with
Mhm.
the Righteous Brothers and the Beatles, and you mix it with the naivete of the Beach Boys' Love You and Adult Child, and then throw that in a blender with computers and samplers and late 80s production. So it's a super unique, almost one of a kind release. It actually, in my mind, pairs really well with Beach Boys '85, Still Cruising, Somewhere in Paradise. It kind of fits in with what the Beach Boys were doing production wise. But yeah, like you guys said, the songwriting is really strong. At times it's super quirky and super almost childlike. And
Mhm.
then at times it's really mature and heart-wrenching. So this album took a while to grow on me, but it's definitely like a comfort album for me and just a spectacular listen.
So yeah, this is an album that I used to kind of have mixed feelings on. There were some songs on it that I've always really liked a lot and I've come back to a lot. But then there were some other songs on here that didn't do too much for me. Of course, there's also the whole Landy connection with this album, which is sometimes a little bit hard not to think about when you listen to this. That said, though, re-listening to the record this week for this episode, I have to say that it's really grown on me quite a bit. I found myself really liking most of the material on here, even a few of the tracks that I used to not really care for. I think that Brian's songwriting, like you guys mentioned, really shines through on a lot of these tracks. And I would also say that the production on this album really elevates it too. Yes, it is like very 80s sounding with all the keyboards and synthesizers, like you guys mentioned. That's not for everybody, but as I've said on a few of our past episodes, I don't really mind that sound at all. And I think that when it's done well, it can sound really great. So I definitely would say that the production and arrangements on this album definitely add a lot to a lot of the tracks. Overall, I still probably would not consider this to be like a perfect record or put it on the same level as something like Love You. But I do think that Brian's songwriting on here is very strong for the most part. And I'd also say that that's probably why I would rank this album above Beach Boys 85 and also some of the band's other 80s material. I'm still not sure if I would put it above Pacific Ocean Blue as my favorite Beach Boys solo record, but it's definitely closed in a bit on that one after re-listening to this. So I think it's a really solid and enjoyable album, and I think that both the songwriting and the production is really strong for the most part. So I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys. All right, so now we're going to get into the history portion of the episode. So I'm going to hand things over to Riley. So Riley, do you kind of want to talk a little bit about how this album came together and also kind of where Brian was at around the time?
All right, so Brian technically started his solo career in 1966 with the release of Caroline. No, but not really. He had a couple of moments in the 70s where he stepped back up as the main producer and the main songwriter for the Beach Boys album, specifically in 15 Big Ones and Love You, but those were still Beach Boys records. But it wasn't until 1988 when he released his solo record, his first real one. But the songs that he wrote for this specific album go back all the way to like 1982. And he wrote about, there's like reported numbers of like 130, some say like 60 songs that he wrote between that period. And only about like 18 were chosen by Sire Records to actually be recorded. You can look back in 1986 when he was reunited with Gary Usher to record something that was called the Wilson Project, or at least that's what it's known as now, where you have a handful of songs that he wrote with Gary Usher pretty much on a daily basis. But the elephant in the room that we do kind of have to talk about, though, is Eugene Landy. 1982, Brian was completely regressed. He was weighing about like 300 something pounds. He's famous for having the cocaine sessions with Dennis, where he'd get a hamburger for every song he wrote. Just mounds of cocaine being used. Brian was not looking too good, so he went back with Eugene Landy, which I think he left him in like I think 77, 78, and he started his 24-hour a day therapy program. And Landy was a big pusher for Brian to be separate from the Beach Boys, unfortunately, so he can kind of bank off of Brian Wilson and get a lot of money from him.
And particularly so this time around.
Especially this time around, I think he kind of got lucky. He was the one who actually reunited Brian with Gary Usher for the Wilson Project. But unfortunately, that didn't work out because Eugene Landy kept on trying to butt in and put some sort of like substance into the songs, try to get something out of it. And I think that's when he actually didn't really like Gary Usher, and that's why he separated him from Brian once again, which is very unfortunate because Gary Usher would pass soon after. However, Landy got him involved with Sire Records. He brought in Sire President Seymour Stein to look at the copious amounts of material that Brian had written. And because of Brian's apparent, keyword apparent, healthy stature and healthy presentation, Seymour Stein agreed to have Brian make a solo album for Sire Records. That's where you get the first collaborations between Andy Paley and Brian Wilson. You also get Russ Titleman back. He wrote songs with Brian in the mid 60s, Sherry, She Needs Me, and Guess I'm Dumb, as producer. And unfortunately, at least at the time, Eugene Landy was labeled executive producer, but that didn't really mean anything. Because every time that Eugene Landy would try to make some sort of contribution, Russ Titleman or Andy Paley kind of behind his back would kind of make other changes. But at the very least, physically, Brian was doing very well. Or in terms of his physical health, Brian was doing very well. And he had lots of material written, and with a lot of different contributions, even that of Jeff Lynne. I know Jake is a big Jeff Lynne fan, and you could definitely hear it on the record. Andy Paley and Russ Titleman, they pieced together Brian Wilson, 88, Brian's first solo record.
Russ Titleman was coming off the success of a massive hit. I'm sure you guys all know it, a song I personally love, Steve Winwood's Higher Love. He produced that song, and that was a massive Grammy-winning hit. And you can definitely hear some of that kind of sleekness, I would say, on this record in the Russ Titleman productions.
Yeah, he also produced one of my favorite Beatles solo albums, George Harrison 79, or the self-titled George Harrison album, which is known as George Harrison.
And Andy Paley worked on a lot of songs for SpongeBob. So
yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
I have read that, I think Brian was reported to be healthier, and he may, to the naked eye, have looked healthier but there's no doubt he was so overprescribed and abused by Landy at this time. So
Mhm.
I do think the collaborators, both credited and uncredited, definitely held a significant weight in getting the album to the finish line.
And then also just you read some of the quotes from the time from the people involved with this album, Russ Titelman, Andy Paley, and it kind of gives you an idea of just how difficult it was, trying to get work done with Brian when Landy, and they would call it his surf Nazis, which were pretty much like these people that were working with him basically to kind of monitor Brian and like make sure Brian was doing what they wanted him to do and stuff. There's a quote from Peter Ames Carlin, the Beach Boys biographer. He said that Landy's meetings with Russ Titelman would often devolve into screaming matches. During the vocal sessions to one song, one of Landy's aides bribed Brian with a milkshake in exchange for him to sing alternate lyrics written by Landy and his girlfriend. The team stopped communicating through the studio intercom system after it was discovered that Landy's aides were using it to eavesdrop on sessions from another room. Paley remarked, anything good we got out of those sessions was done totally on stolen time. So pretty crazy, all the stuff they were dealing with trying to get this album together. But in the end, I think that it turned out really great. Glad that on future release they did remove all the Landy credits and stuff. So because he really didn't contribute
And
anything.
that's why I said, for better or for worse, this album sounds incredible and came out incredible because there's clearly a lot of stress that went into making it. And this was like peak Landy like interference in Brian's
Yeah.
life. So
think
Yeah,
Yep.
it's kind of crazy that it's a Brian Wilson solo album in name, but he was almost only allowed to contribute to it on Landy's time and under
Yeah.
Landy's watch, and then it had to be put together and finished in his absence. So everyone involved at the end of the day did an amazing job because when I listen to it, it doesn't necessarily sound like a Frankenstein effort per se. It sounds very cohesive. So to
Yeah.
learn that there were so many cooks in the kitchen and everyone pulling their weight is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a testament to the talents of Brian and Andy Paley and Russ Titelman and Jeff Lynne and everyone that was involved on this project.
All right. Do we want to get into the track by track rundown now for Brian Wilson 88?
let's
Let's do
do
it.
it.
All right. So the album opens up with Love and Mercy. So this is a Brian Wilson composition. I know Landy was originally on the credits, but they removed him. It was also inspired by the song "What the World Needs Now Is Love," which is a great Bacharach tune from the '60s. You can definitely kind of hear that a bit in this for sure. So I can see where Brian's coming from there. I used to actually not care too much for this version of the song. I actually preferred the stripped back re-recording from the "I Just Wasn't Made for These Times" album that Brian did a decade later. But over the past year or so, I have to say that the '80s production on this one has really grown on me a lot. And I'd now say it's my preferred version of the song. I really like the use of keyboard and synthesizer on this. I think it kind of introduces you to the sound of the album right away. I also think that musically, this is one of the strongest songs on the album. I think that it has a really great melody. I like the lyrics quite a bit, and it has some really nice backing vocals as well. Maybe not the most musically complex song that Brian ever wrote, but it definitely is very memorable, and I can see why they chose this one as both the opening track and the lead single from the album. So this is easily one of the highlights of the record for me. And I can also see why Brian used to close his concerts out with this song as well. I think it's a really great way to kind of wrap up the night. So really like the song a lot. It's one of my favorite Beach Boys solo tracks.
Yeah, I think it's a very moving song, lyrically. I think that it kind of is a testament to kind of like where Brian, I mean, I know like there was some, landing and everything, but like the kind of testament to like where he had come from and how far he had come and how he'd recovered from a lot of stuff. I think that's why it was fitting that it was used as the title of his biopic. Backing track sounds incredible. Melody is great. Yeah, production. This was a Brian and Russ Titelman production, immaculate. And I really love like kind of like the when the key you kind of get like that keyboard breakdown, like with all the synthesizers and everything. That's a really cool part of the song. But yeah, I really really enjoy this song a lot. And you're right, very fitting concert closer. Yeah, because I think he always closed the concert with it. I think he closed my concert when I saw him with it.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of this song. Although I think over the years I've kind of gotten really used to it, so it doesn't really hit as big as it used to. But and Nate pointed this out to me when I stayed in Wisconsin last year. It's actually a similar chord progression to Forever by Dennis.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was done on purpose or not. With Brian, you can never really tell. You'd have to like really listen to them back to back to figure it out because it kind of blew my mind once I figured it out. But I really love the use of synths on this. I've always preferred this over the piano ballad version, which is a great version of the song, but I really like the synthesizers on this. It sounds crazy that I would really like synths on what's supposed to be this slow moving ballad. I really love that breakdown where you have a lot of the harmony stack on it, the and then you go right back into the chorus. I think that part always moves me. And the lyrics aren't anything nuts, and you never really see crazy lyrics on a Brian Wilson album. Well, I guess except like any album from the 60s, like Pet Sounds. But besides that, I digress. The lyrics are very simple, but they are very moving, and it's a very, very pretty song.
Yeah, so this song is really so special to me, and I think the lyrics are one of my, favorite lyrics of all time. And it's just such a sweet expression of what we need is love and mercy. And I could sit here and talk about the production or the arranging all day, but really, to me, the core sentiment of the song is that lyric, love and mercy. And part of the reason this song is so special to me, I'm actually a little choked up thinking about it, is my whole life I've had a tradition of getting dinner with my dad every Wednesday night. And for the last 10 years or so, almost every Wednesday night, we conclude the dinners with listening to Love and Mercy on the way home.
Mm.
And we always just talk about what a beautiful sentiment that is and what a beautiful message that is. So it's such a gorgeous song, such a meaningful song. And yeah, it'll always make me think of those nights driving home with my dad.
That's a really touching story.
Yeah.
Thank you. And at the end of the day, I'd say too, just to put a cap on it, aside from my personal relationship to the song, is you can say, Surfer Girl or California Girls, for Brian's signature song. But at the end of the day, since he released it, this song really became his signature song. And it's a message that is relevant around the world, and it's a timeless message. And it came to him, during a period of darkness, which makes that all the more special because of that.
All right, the next track on the album is Walk in the Line. So this is credited to Brian and Nick Laird Close, who is from the band The Dream Academy. From what I've read, he didn't actually contribute too much to this, besides like I think a melody or two out here. This is also, I believe, the only track from the Wilson project that officially made it onto the album. So this is another one that used to not really do too much for me, but re-listening to it before this episode, it grew on me quite a bit. I really like the arrangement with the sleigh bells and synth bass. To me, it almost kind of sounds like something from Love You, which might have something to do with why I now like this song. I just really like kind of that synthesizer sound and the chorus, like the walk, walk, walk in the line. Definitely has kind of that classic Brian Wilson sound. I could see how the 80s production on this one could be a little bit much for somebody, but I personally do really like it, and I think that it suits the song well. So this one was definitely a pleasant surprise for me re-listening to it this week, and it's now on my Beach Boys playlist, so I'll definitely be coming back to it. So
Oh yeah.
what do you guys think of Walking the Line?
Banger. I think it's a banger. I first of all, I love the melody. Walk, 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 walk in the line. I need some loving. Love it. I love the production with the sleigh bells and everything. I like the backing vocals that come in, very Beach Boys-esque. And I love the 80s production. I'm a sucker for 80s music. So I think this is a banger, and I really, really enjoy this song a lot.
Everything you said, Matt, this one fucking rocks. I think we mentioned with the 85 episode that like for every like awesome album opener you have, you need like an equally like awesome second song to continue the flow. And I think this one just like kicks everything up a notch. I'm a big fan of it. And you mentioned that one part, I need your loving, loving, wah, 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 wah. That part's
Yeah.
so good. It makes the what could have been like just a very repetitive chorus, and it kicks it into high gear, and it adds just that extra spice that you really need. Again, the lyrics are nothing to write home about, but the absolute energy, there's so much energy in this song, and it's an absolute banger, and it's one that I come back to quite a lot.
Yeah, I this one has like a R&B-ish, like rock and roll kind of energy that we hadn't gotten too much from Brian since like Carl and the Passions and 15 Big Ones. So it's a return to form of the Brian Wilson that writes, rock and roll songs, and that's what he initially became known for. And yeah, so I will say when I originally heard this song, the wonkiness of the production just like totally threw me off with the saxophones and the percussion and the synths. It was like really almost kind of shocking to me. But in the way that Love You and 15 Big Ones grew on me, this one totally grew on me as well. And I can definitely picture this as a Beach Boys tune with Mike or even like Blondie uh doing some of those vocals in the chorus. But yeah, I love it the way it is as well.
Yeah, this is one of those ones too where I feel like it's kind of blending different eras of Brian because you've got like the sleigh bells and stuff, which kind of makes you think of, some of his 60s arrangements with like pet sounds. But then with that synth bass, I can't help but think of Love You, and just thinking of like what would this have sounded like if the band had, if Brian had written this earlier and the band had recorded it on Love You. So it's one of those like really kind of quirky Brian songs, but like you guys said, it's just really catchy and fun. And it definitely grew on me because I remember this was definitely one that the first time I heard it, the first couple times I heard it, it didn't really do much. So,
I think you've made a really good point where like I think you could kind of describe this whole album as kind of like an amalgamation of like the different decades of Brian because like
yeah.
like the production there's a lot of 60s touches with the productions with like the sleigh bells and like the saxophones and stuff like that. You have like the quirkiness of the 70s in a lot of the lyrics, but then you also have like the 80s sheen on a lot of it. So I think that's actually a really
Yeah, that's so true.
yeah, I like that.
All right. So the third track on the album is Melt Away. So this is definitely my favorite song on the whole album. I absolutely love this one. I think it's just classic Brian Wilson songwriting. I think it has a great melody, some cool chord changes. I really love the bridge section and the lyrics as well. I think that they're really personal. I've always really related to the words. I also really love the production and the arrangement on this track. Specifically, you got the sleigh bells again, and then also the backing vocal arrangement. I think they both add a lot to the song. So yeah, this is one of my favorite Beach Boys solo tracks. I rank it right up there with some of my favorite songs from Pacific Ocean Blue. And you guys know how much I like the highlights on there. So I really love this song, and it's one that really moves me when I listen to it. Just because I find the lyrics relatable, and the fact that Brian's the one singing the words, knowing everything that he's been through. So I love this one a lot.
I agree with everything you said. I really, really enjoy this song too. Melody is gorgeous. I think Brian sings it very well. There's a lot of passion and emotion in his vocal. I really love the arrangement with the backing vocals. The production is great. This is another great Brian and Russ Titleman production. And yeah, it's just classic quintessential Brian, and definitely one of the highlights of the album for me as well.
I really, really love the way that this song effortlessly dances between different key signatures and the way that Brian puts the chords together in this song is, on par with his younger days when he was writing stuff like The Warmth of the Sun and Keep an Eye on Summer. Definitely that top tier level chordsmith Brian Wilson, as well as the melody is just gorgeous the way that it leaps and jumps around. And like you guys mentioned, the lyrics are so relatable. And I can think of so many tough times in my life where this song specifically helped me through. And gosh, the production with I really like the use of the timpani or the at least timpani sounding drums that really harken back to Pet Sounds. And, I feel like no one really has like a favorite song. I feel like everyone has their like group of favorites, but there have been plenty of times in my life where if you said, "Hey, what's your favorite song?" I may very well have said Melt Away. This one is just one of those all-time really touching songs for me. I play this one all the time, all the time.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, this is I'm sure you guys have all said it. This is classic Brian Wilson writing a ballad. It's just so gorgeous. I mean, I think the production actually aids this one quite a bit. I think each of these, every Brian Wilson ballad is very much aided by the production, and I really love all the small touches that he does on this one. And as Nate said, like the lyrics, they kind of get to you in a way. Again, they're not like crazy play on words like Elvis Costello or like I can't really think of anybody else, but like kind of like it's not really like anything nuts, but they somehow find a way to reach you, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that the song is very melodic, and I think this is a fine example of like how I said that this is Brian Wilson getting back into his element in terms of songwriting, especially with melody, and that chorus just hits me every time. So beautiful song, probably one of my favorites off the album. I would say it's definitely at least in my top three. So
This
Yeah.
song really sounds like if I just wasn't made for these times was Brian expressing his vulnerability in his 20s. This is him expressing those same feelings 22 years later.
Mhm.
The same kind of songwriting, same sounds, same dynamics.
Yeah. That lyric, I do really like this lyric a lot. I feel just like an island until I see you smiling. I think that's a really great lyric. And apparently Brian just improvised that in the studio when they asked him to like rewrite a few of the words. And like he just came up with that on the spot. I think that's a really great lyric, you know? So really like that. And then, yeah,
Classic Beach Boy line.
yeah. And then and then that bridge section too. Like that might be honestly one of my favorite Brian Wilson bridges. Like the I won't let you see me suffer. No, not me. Like it's just so like just well written and like you guys said, I think the production really elevates this one a lot. It's again, it's kind of like a blend of different eras of Brian. You have like the 60s sound, but also some of the 70s sound, and it all kind of comes together to make this just really beautiful and moving ballad. So I love this one.
Part of me wonders if this was like autobiographical about the struggles that Brian was going through as it related to Landy. But then again, he was a co-writer, so it makes
He's
you
probably too
question.
stupid to realize that.
Yeah, it's very it's hard to imagine being in his shoes and listening to that and being like, "Yep,
Yeah.
send it out." You
Right.
know?
All right, the next track on the record is Baby Let Your Hair Grow Long. So this one's kind of interesting because it's almost like a spiritual sequel to Caroline No, because you have like the words about like a girl growing her hair, or him asking a girl to grow her hair out, almost to like regain her innocence. I remember that this was one of the first songs in the album that really clicked with me when I first heard it a few years ago. Kind of like Melt Away. I just found it to be really interesting musically. I really love both the verses and the chorus, especially that throw their lives away part. I think that's really cool sounding. And honestly, like this song, I know like not everybody raves about this one in the same way with Love and Mercy or Melt Away, but I consider this one of the highlights of the album. I just really think it's a well-written song, and I think that the backing vocals add a lot to this one. So, really cool track, and another one of those cool kind of bridge sections where you got like the synthesizer, which I really like too. Anything that's like reminiscent of Love You, I typically like. So, I really like this one a lot.
I really like this one a lot too. For a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, like the "Baby, let your hair go, baby, let your hair." Just like I like the layer, like the backing vocals. Like you said, the contrast between the verses and the chorus. Production on this one is immaculate. Arrangement is really, really good, and lyrically, it's a very interesting song too. This is one I really, really enjoy quite a bit. I mean, honestly, so far for me, we're like batting 100 so far with the first four. What a strong start to the record.
Oh yeah, this is definitely one of the best songs on the record. It has that what I could kind of call like Brian's famous truck driver moments. And if you don't know what like a truck driver moment is, and I'm probably saying this wrong, Nate could probably correct me on this. It's a moment in a song where you kind of just put something there that normally wouldn't fit, and it just kind of comes right out of nowhere. It hits you like a truck. Like
Oh,
you hear it on some lot of Brian songs. I think Getting Hungry is one of them where like you have like a very silent chorus, very soft moment, and then bam. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening here. So Nate, please correct me if I used that wrong, but it's a truck driver moment.
I
Uh,
love that. I've never
you
heard that, but I love
you
that.
have and usually it's kind of used in music to like for like a random chord that shouldn't follow another chord. But I'm kind of using it in a different way, like appropriating that saying. But I love that in this song. The verses kind of get you off guard. You have that like I wish you, and then it's like very slow, and then you have that one line. It's like in my mind I can see, and it just kind of comes right out of nowhere, and it's one of the best Brian Wilson choruses that I've heard in maybe ever. It comes so out of nowhere, and it absolutely makes the song one awesome piece of music. I think this might be in my top three too. I would have to really look at it, but it's so awesome and it's super melodic, and it reminds me a lot of Pet Sounds with this one, almost like a I'm waiting for the day in a lot of ways.
Well, my hair's getting a little long, so I guess I took the lyrics to heart a little too much. But well, I really like this one because I've always viewed it as sort of this like slightly off-kilter rocker where, the rhythm is pretty driving and pretty rock and roll, but the way the bass line and the chords go is just a little off balance, a little off kilter, and it's kind of throwing you off. It's a little jerky. It reminds me of You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone and Funky Pretty and some of those songs that Brian wrote. And there's like just some really interesting stuff going on with the bass line and the like I think it's like a fuzz guitar riff as well in those verses. So I made the observation of comparing this one to Caroline No too because of the hair length subject matter. But yeah, this was one that just immediately clicked for me as like, okay, this is awesome.
All right, the next track on the album is Little Children. So this one's interesting because it was originally demoed during the sessions for Love You around 1976. If you go on YouTube, you can find that demo. It's just like a basic piano demo, so nothing too like crazy. But so this one, I know musically it might not be the most complex or interesting song, but I actually do enjoy it quite a bit, mostly for the backing track. I think Nate, you'll like this reference, but I think it has a very kind of Phil Spector sound to it, production-wise. It's just like very heavy, and I think that that elevates it quite a bit for me. I also do find the chorus really catchy, even if it is pretty simple. Like the marching along, singing a song, and I also think that it's fun how Wendy and Carney get a little shout out in the lyrics as well. I wouldn't consider this one an essential song by any means, but I do personally enjoy it. And I also think that it's pretty funny that the Wiggles of all bands did a cover of the song many years later, which you could find on
Hell yeah,
YouTube.
man.
Yeah, so fun little song, nothing too complex, but I think the production on this one really carries it for me. So
Yeah, good production, nice melody, a little slight for my tastes. Definitely very Love You-esque lyrics. They're very quirky, and I do like the shout out to Wendy and Carney. This is gonna sound kind of weird, but like the marching along, singing a song kind of sounded similar to Mountain of Love to me. I don't know if it's
the
just
holy
Oh,
shit,
you're so right.
doesn't it sound like it? A little bit?
it's
Yeah.
it's like the same.
I wasn't gonna say that. I was gonna say it. It sounds like waiting for my Bobby to get home by
Yeah, it sounds like Mountain of Love. I was like, because I'm hearing
I
like
didn't even hear that. Oh my God.
so yeah, the similar chord progression. But yeah, I think it's a fun little interlude kind of track. I agree, not really essential, but fun in the context of the record.
Yeah, I think this is only one that I'd ever listen to in the context of the album. I think this is kind of a weak point for it, but I don't think it's anything bad. It's just kind of pretty inoffensive. But I enjoyed it. I was gonna say it sounds like waiting for my Bobby to get home or wait till my Bobby gets home by Nate, you know the answer.
It's
Um
either the Crystals or Darlene.
yeah, I
I'm gonna
thought it
look it
sounded
up
like
now.
that. So Mountain of Love is an insane pull, Matt. Good job on that. Um, but yeah, it's just inoffensive. It fits its spot in the record
Yeah,
as
it's Darlene Love.
Darlene Love. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all right. Only Brian can do that song, I think, though. If anybody else did that, I'd probably shut the record off.
Yeah, I think like like Brian, kind of like with like the childlike innocence that he kind of has. Like I almost feel like that does make you enjoy the song more, kind of knowing who wrote it and stuff. Like the naivety, that Nate was kind of talking about.
Yeah, so I'm not reinventing the wheel with my take, but total Phil Spector, Crystals, Darlene Love kind of vibe, especially with those triplets. It's kind of a homage to Do Run Run and that kind of feel. And yeah, the lyrics are, I can't even say I could think of and recite them all off the top of my head because the music is actually pretty breathtaking. And that's what always resonates with me in this case over the lyrics. And when I think about this song, I just think about the fact that he's really going for those falsetto notes. And it sounds a lot like the guys who sang on I Get Around and Don't Back Down all those years earlier. That same timbre. He's a little older, might be a little more strained,
Yeah.
but it's definitely that same Brian Wilson just wailing on those high notes. So it's awesome to hear that. And this one, out of all the songs on the record, has a little bit of more of that 60s flavor with the instrumentation and the way that it's produced. It could sort of pass for more of an oldie, whereas like a lot of the other songs sound very electronic and not really in that like oldies lane, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Brian also had a pretty interesting quote about this song too. It said that he'd intended for the song to convince listeners that little kids are really cool. There's no responsibility when you're a kid, and I admire the freedom from responsibility that kids have. I'm jealous of it. That track was done as an attempt to make people feel younger, he said. So, and it does. It has like that childlike innocence to it, when you listen to it. So, all right, the next track on the album is One for the Boys. So this is an a cappella piece, and I know if you're a regular listener of this show, you probably know that I'm usually not the biggest fan of a cappella tracks. It's just not really my thing. It's just not something that I often find that much enjoyment from. That said, I will say that I do consider this to be one of the stronger Beach Boys related a cappella tracks that I have heard. I like how it manages to be both kind of pretty but also kind of haunting at the same time. And I also think that Brian's late 80s vocals actually work really well in this one. So in the context of the album, I would say this one fits in pretty well. I probably would have put it at the end of side one instead of the second to last track, but I am glad that it's on here. And honestly, this might surprise you guys a bit, but I could see myself occasionally coming back to this one outside of the album. So I think it's a cool song or a cool a cappella track, and I think kind of like the haunting atmosphere of it. So this was a pleasant surprise for me re-listening to it.
Yeah, I will say that I don't mind a cappella in doses. If you had to have me sit through like an hour and a half a cappella show, I'd probably want to shoot myself. But I can take it in doses. As far as this goes, I agree with what you said. It sounds really good. Brian's vocals work really good on it, and I agree with you that the ambience of the track is like somewhat both haunting and touching. I also really like the title, "One for the Boys." I kind of see this as like his kind of tip off to, the rest of the Beach Boys. So yeah, a pretty enjoyable acapella.
I didn't make that connection, Matt. That's cool. The one for the boys. Yeah, that makes.
You
Really?
never made that connection?
Well, I
Jake, that's got to be the stupidest thing you've ever said, man.
Well, I re-listening. I hadn't heard this song more than like twice in my life, probably two or three times. So
Oh,
I didn't think about it much, man. This song.
anyways, Jake, I'm gonna hard disagree with you there. I think that this has a perfect spot on the album. I see it very much
I said
as,
it does. I said it doesn't.
oh, I thought you said you prefer it at the end of side one, though.
I do prefer that.
I
But
prefer it specifically though in this spot right
oh,
before
okay,
There's So
okay.
Many. I think it's a great almost like prelude to that song,
Mhm.
which spoiler alert, I think is the best song on the record. Um, so it kind of acts like a little bit of like a prelude, but I think it's so gorgeous, and it's something that it showcases something that's been missing from a lot of like I think the late 70s, early to mid 80s Beach Boys records, which is the harmonies, and it shows that Brian Wilson can still compose something with harmonies and very well. I think it's very melodic, very haunting, but very beautiful, and I think it works great as a prelude to my favorite track on the album. So I do really enjoy it. I don't think I'll ever come back to it by itself, though.
So for many, many of Brian's future releases, it almost became like a cliche of a Brian Wilson album for it to open with an a cappella or a nearly a cappella song. They did it on Our Prayer for Smile, and then That Lucky Old Sun opens a cappella, and That's Why God Made the Radio opens a cappella, and the Gershwin album opens a cappella. So you get the point. So with that said, I think this actually could have been a very cool opening track for the album as almost like a statement of this is still the same guy who was putting together those crazy harmonic arrangements in the 60s. And it's also paying a very clear homage to Smile opening with Our Prayer,
Mhm.
which now that I mentioned that, people wouldn't have known that at the time because Smile wasn't released yet. But we have the hindsight of being able to make that connection. So I love this piece of music so much. I It blows my mind that Brian, as far as I know, is singing all of those voices. So, like Jake said, it's just very haunting and in my mind, like a follow-up piece to a lot of the great a cappella stuff that the Beach Boys did in their heyday, like Our Prayer and the Lord's Prayer and A Young Man Is Gone, things like that.
All right. The final track on side one of Brian Wilson '88 is "There's So Many." So I remember this is a song that Riley kind of turned me on to a while ago. Since then, though, I'd honestly kind of forgotten about it until re-listening to it this week. But when I did re-listen, I remember now why I enjoyed this one so much. This is a really strong track. Like Riley has said, I think it's a highlight of the album. It's another track that I feel like it kind of combines Brian's classic songwriting with kind of the 80s production style. I really like the use of keyboards and sleigh bells on this. And I especially like that bridge section, which has kind of that cool synth sound with the chimes. The planets are spinning around part. It just has this really kind of cool, like ethereal, atmospheric sound to it, which I really like. So, this is another song in the album that I really enjoy. And I'm glad that I re-listened to it because I really had forgotten how much I liked this one since Riley had mentioned it to me. So, really cool track.
Yeah, I really like this one too. So first of all, I really like that little 5 second intro piece. Kind of sounds like something I'd hear like almost in like a video game, or like I'm thinking of like a short film that takes place in like a forest or something. And then you kind of get into the backing track with, like, as you mentioned, the awesome keyboards and sleigh bells, everything production. Yeah, there's so many, na na na. It's got a great melody. And yeah, just Brian sings it really great, and I think that the lyrics are really moving too. I really, really do like this one a lot, and I think that this is a really, really great way to end side one of the record, and yet again another great production work from Russ Titleman.
Yeah, man, there's not a whole lot of Brian Wilson. I mean, that's actually totally a lie. But when I listen to a Brian Wilson song, it's not usually the verse that I really look forward to hearing, but this is one of those ones where I look forward to the verse more than I do the chorus or any other part of the song. And then you get to that little part where it's like, your face, I see it in the sky, na 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 na, na 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 na. And I especially love the use of his falsetto. It blends in so well, and I feel like on a lot of like the '80s tracks, you're like, oh, Brian's back with his falsetto, but it's not the same one from the '60s. I hardly notice it on this one, and it's just so melodic. And again, I'm gonna say this a lot of these songs, and I think it could be said about anything on side one. It's only a song that Brian could write and produce just like this, because if it was anybody else, I probably wouldn't like it. But it's such a charming song, and it's my favorite song of the album by far. It's one I come back to so much.
Yeah, so compositionally, I think this song is brilliant. I think the music is gorgeous and the lyrics are touching. So as a song, I think it's really immaculate. And you guys probably rarely ever hear me say this about, especially about a Beach Boys or Brian Wilson song. And I guess let me say, there's a lot to admire about the production and the arrangement. However, this is one where some of the production choices kind of detract from the overall experience for me. Uh, I love the percussion and Brian's vocals are sung with a lot of heart, but some of those like wacky synth stabs or like synth kind of like noises that abruptly sort of come in and out, especially in the verse, to me just are like overindulgence. And I think this song is kind of begging for a more acoustic guitar, softly played piano type of arrangement over all the literal bells and whistles. That's literally what I'd say I wouldn't like about the track too much are the bell and whistle like noises. That's the best way I could explain it. But again, as a composition, gorgeous. But I would have loved to hear just a very stripped back, more acoustic, kind of along the lines of Let the Wind Blow or Add Some Music to Your Day or Our Sweet Love, that kind of feel.
There's a lot of Beach Boys tracks that we've covered that we've like all shat on. And we finally get to the one where you kind of like make fun of, or not make fun of, you don't like the production. And it's this one?
Yeah, I'm a
And
little. I got,
Keeping the
like
summer
I said,
alive. We're
like I
gonna
said,
get
I
through
think
summer in
there's a
paradise. And you pick this one?
like I said, I think there's a lot to admire, but just some of the choices are detract from me. And I'm not saying all of it is
I'm not
bad.
dissing your take.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked that it's this particular song. I feel like you would have been raving about this. I'm just
Oh,
shocked.
and I love it. But yeah, I hope you see the nuance of what I'm saying. That I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
even saying
I
that
could
all
totally
the
respect your
production is
opinion. I'm just
trash.
really
It's
shocked that
just
it's this particular
those
track.
synth noises I don't care for particularly. And maybe it's just the intervals that they're playing or the way they come in. But don't get me wrong, the song itself I really love.
So shocked. Wow.
there's so many songs that Nate could have said that about.
A lot of songs I've said that about.
Yeah, I think I already mentioned this too, but I think like my favorite part of the song. I know Riley loves the verses, but I think that bridge is just super cool though.
Oh
Like the
yeah, I
planets
love that
are
part too.
spinning around. And then another observation I saw a couple people make about this song online, lyrically and thematically, there's some similarities between this song and Solar System.
Yeah, I
You
was about
know,
to say this kicks Solar System's ass.
yeah, it's close for me actually. It's pretty close for me.
This one doesn't have "If Mars had life on it, I'd find my wife."
This is like if Solar System was actually good.
Going
It's a
back.
good song with a questionable vocal, but I don't mind the vocal. All right, so let's flip the record over and kick off side two with the song Nighttime. So this is the first song in the album that I'd say I'm really not the biggest fan of. I wouldn't say that it's terrible by any means, and I think that it's good that there is like another upbeat song on the record. But I just really don't find it that interesting or memorable musically compared to a lot of the other material on here. I also would say that it's a little too repetitive. They really hammer that nighttime is the right time chorus into your head, and it's just a little bit too much for me. I also wanted to mention that whenever I hear this song, it's hard not to think of that video of Brian on one of those late night shows, like dancing
Yeah.
the microphone. He just looks like he's really out of his comfort zone on that video, and I kind of feel bad for him watching that, just knowing that Landy kind of forced him to do all that, make all those late night appearances and stuff. And this was the song that he had to sing, and really I don't even know why they chose this song in the first place to do on TV. I guess because it's upbeat, but I think there's so many stronger songs that they could have focused on performing in front of an audience on TV than this one. But yeah, overall though, I wouldn't consider this like a terrible song, like I said, but it definitely is a weaker spot on the album for me. And it's definitely not an essential track by any means. So, not the biggest fan of this one, and never really have been.
I don't know, man. I kind of like it. I don't think it's like one of the best songs on the album, but first of all, I really like that kind of like synthesizer that like kind of sounds like you're like emulating the theremin at the beginning. I think it kind of sets the tone of the song. Chorus is repetitive, but I think it's catchy, and I love like that horn breakdown. So I quite like it. I definitely agree. It's probably like one of the weaker songs on the album, but I still enjoy it for what it is.
Couldn't have said it better, Matt. It's nowhere near the best. It's probably not one I'm gonna come back to a whole lot. But man, it kind of rocks a little bit. I really that synthesizer that you mentioned, that's really cool. I think it brings a lot of spice to a song that easily could have been boring. It's kind of like Brian Wilson does like 80s dance pop, but like with his specific production. And again, it's only a song that he could have done because if this was anybody else, I would not care for it at all. But it's got a little groove to it. I really rock with it. I think the lyrics could have been about 10,000 times better. Because nighttime is delight time, it's starlight time is by no means a fucking wordsmith writing that. It's just I think I could have done better, and I consider myself a pretty terrible lyricist. I think probably like a kindergartner could have done better, but the backing track though and Brian's vocal delivery is awesome. I just although you can kind of tell that he was a bit forced to write more of an upbeat song, or at least he was kind of forced to put this one on compared to what else he could have been on. But it adds a lot of spice to the record, and I really love the use of synthesizer on this track. So it's a pretty good song. It's got a nice groove to it. I just don't think it should have opened up side two.
Yeah, to me, this one's kind of like the transcendental meditation or student demonstration time of this album, or Here Comes the Night, like the one song in the album that just comes so out of left field where you're like,
Yep.
whoa, what the hell is this? And yeah, it's so goofy and so silly, and yet there's like this like strained, almost like anxious element to the song, which maybe I just derived that from, like Jake said, from those late night clips you see of Brian performing this in leather pants, like very deadpan in the face. So it's just a strange listen, that's for sure. But yeah, it has kind of the classic Brian Wilson use of saxophone, and it's fun, but it kind of made my jaw drop the first time I heard it a bit, no doubt. And I gotta be honest, I really rarely revisit this one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's fun for sure. Like, it's not like I think it does like have a place on the album. Yet at the same time, like you said, Nate, it also does kind of like catch you off guard just because like you listen to these other songs, especially the songs on side one, like Melt Away, and these beautiful ballads with a lot of emotion in them, Love and Mercy, and those songs, and then yeah, you get like this like party like dancey pop song, and like Brian's like it just feels like it's out of Brian's comfort zone. So.
It's another tune that I think really, to me, it would make so much sense as like a Beach Boys song with Mike and Bruce and the guys on there. Kind of like it almost sounds like it could live in the same world as like Wipeout and that kind of like almost like goofy self-parody era of the band, But as like a song on Brian's solo album, which is like a very emotionally heavy album.
Yeah.
It's like so random.
Yeah, I have to
But
think when Mike criticized this album, on like those radio interviews and stuff. I have to think like when he said like I thought the lyrics, I thought I could have did better lyrics. I have to think like this is one of the songs he was probably thinking of. Like, there's no way Mike could. I mean, Mike could have topped this probably in like 20 seconds writing lyrics. So
is this one of the tunes that Brian performed on that what was it called? The Endless Summer series in the 80s? I think he did In My Car and Love and Mercy, but I can't remember if he did
Oh
this
yeah,
one.
you did.
Did he do Nighttime as well? We'll have to go back and check the
Probably.
tape. Can't remember.
It's
I
definitely
wouldn't say
nowhere. This doesn't touch In My Car though. In My Car is classic Brian
kind
Wilson.
of rich for Mike to say that oh I could have done better lyrics, but then like the album he was promoting at the time was freaking Summer in Paradise, which has like arguably the worst Beach Boys song of all time on it. So
But it has Island Fever.
yeah, but it also
Still
has like
surfing. What a
it
classic.
has Lahaina Aloha too.
it has some good
Fancy
songs, but like
tapping.
just play like Summer. What's the Summer of Love to anybody? And they're like I've used it as an endurance test. Some people can't even get 10 seconds in, but they turn it off.
My friend
Yeah,
was
of the songs from the era, I could picture if they did put a Brian song on Summer in Paradise, this one would actually fit.
Girls are always ready.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like Summer of Love. It is kind
Yeah.
of like that
I
song. I'm
take
You know
not
what
gonna
else?
lie.
So we got to make a
Summer of
fan
Love.
fan mix of this like merged with
Yeah.
I would take this over Summer of Love in a heartbeat.
What about Smart? That's when Jake has enough.
Smart Girls, oh
All
god.
right, the next track on the album is Let It Shine. So this one is a Brian and Jeff Lynne composition, which is pretty cool. So if you've watched any of our off time and episodes, and I think Riley already mentioned it earlier, but you probably know that I'm a really big ELO fan. Jeff Lynne is one of my favorite songwriters and producers of all time. And I'd say that a lot of his albums with ELO probably like rank right up there with some of my favorite albums of all time. So it's pretty cool to me that he and Brian both collaborated on this song. From what I've read, though, it does sound like Jeff was mostly responsible for writing this track. It sounds like Brian mostly added the intro and some of the lyrics. Listening to it again for this episode, yeah, this is pretty clearly a Jeff Lynne composition to me. I could almost like hear in my head what Jeff's vocal would sound like on this, so I do think that he probably played the biggest role in writing it. Judging the song itself, I think it's pretty enjoyable. I really like the verses a lot, both musically and lyrically. And I think that this is one of the songs where the slick 80s production really suits it well. I also think that Brian's vocals on this are pretty strong as well. I know that like not all of Brian's like late 80s vocals work for everybody, but I think that this one, like, it really suits kind of his range at the time well. That all said, though, if I were to grade this one compared to like some of Brian's other 80s work as well as Jeff's, I'd probably give it like a B or a B minus. I think it's a pretty enjoyable song, and I do sometimes come back to it outside of the record. But I still would say that there's higher highs on both this album, but also in Jeff Lynne's 80s output as well. So overall, I do like this one quite a bit. And I think that it's really neat that Brian and Jeff worked together on this song. It's almost like two of my musical worlds colliding. So cool track. And I also think that there's a funny quote from Brian, too, where he said about working with Jeff. He said, it was a little tense. He wears shades at night. He wears them all the time. He'll be in a room at night and you can't see his eyes. So I thought that that was kind of funny, too. So
That's Nate.
Yeah, what kind of asshole does that?
Jack Nicholson. Yeah, I think this is a solid track. I think it's a pretty moving song. Brian sings it very well. I like melody's pretty nice too. It's got some good production touches. I kind of agree with you though. I think it's like a B, B plus, a solid track. I don't think it's like one of the absolute highlights of the albums. Now, I will admit I'm not as big of an ELO fan as you are, so I'm not super familiar with Jeff Lynne's 80s work, but I'll take your word for it that this
I am.
you guys are. I'm not as big of an ELO fan, but I'll take your guys' word for it. Yeah, solid track, but definitely not one of the absolute best on the record for me.
yeah. Riley, I will say this clears a lot of secret messages, though. Oh, man.
Yeah, I will say in terms of it being a Brian Wilson song, I find it very lackluster. But if you put Jeff Lynne's vocal inside of it, take away Brian's, put in some of that yellow production, it would probably be an upbeat banger from Jeff Lynne. But in terms of what we got, it's fine. It's honestly kind of a letdown in the album compared to like a lot of the fun, quirky tracks we got. This kind of sounds like Brian doing like Phil Collins, like a la like Tarzan soundtrack because I could just as much as I can hear Jeff's vocal, I can just as well hear Phil Collins singing fucking Tarzan soundtrack with it.
Hey, don't shit on the Tarzan soundtrack, man.
Oh,
That's
it's good. I'm just saying, like, it's just not what I want from Brian.
no,
I
that's
think
fair.
you could slide into the Tarzan soundtrack easily. You got Phil Collins being like, "Let it shine," and you just like see like Tarzan swinging around. So I mean, I could just totally see that. But I do think it's fine. I just would rather have gotten like an ELO version of this with like bring up the tempo, put some Jeff Lynne like classic production on it, and bit right in on. We'll still want balance of power.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I actually would like to hear an ELO version of this. You know me, I'm from the biggest fan of this, but I'm surprised we haven't heard an AI version of it yet. Give it a couple months, I'm sure you'll find something.
Yep. Someone might make it listening to this episode.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody will.
Well, I love this
Yeah.
song so much. I think out of all the songs on this album, it sounds the most, in my opinion, like timeless, like production wise. I think even today it sounds kind of modern. And I love the driving nature of it and the really aggressive, Jeff Lynne style drums. A lot of
Hmm.
Brian Wilson's songs and even a lot of the songs of his on this album kind of lack in the drum department. And Brian uses drums differently than a lot of other producers, but the drums on this song really just smack you right in the face. And I think it just sounds so cool. To me, it sounds like Brian joined ELO for a tune. And this is one that I revisit all the damn time. Like maybe close to every day. I love this
Wow.
song so much.
All right. The second to last track on the album is Meet Me in My Dreams Tonight. So this is a Brian, Andy Paley, and Andy Dean collaboration. So this is another track in the album that didn't do too much for me the first few times I heard it. Re-listening to it for this episode, it has grown on me a bit. I do like the production on it. Nate, this is another one where I feel like it really kind of has that wall of sound to it, which I dig.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, though, musically, this one still hasn't clicked with me yet. I don't think that there's really anything that I don't like about it, but I just haven't really connected with it in the way that I have with some of the other songs on here. So I could see this one growing on me more in the future, but for now, it's not really a favorite of mine on the record. I'm definitely don't see myself coming back to this one too much in the near future. So
I really quite like this one actually. This
okay.
might be my favorite on the second side. I think the melody is really great. I think it's really catchy. I love how the chorus sounds. I like the production touches. And honestly, like I know this is an Andy Paley co-write. This honestly sounds like something I might have been able to hear in SpongeBob because I think a lot of songs from SpongeBob. So maybe it's just nostalgia for me because that was one of my favorite shows growing up. But yeah, I really like this one. Meet me in my dreams tonight. Da, da, da. Yeah, I really like this one quite a lot actually.
Yeah, also a big fan of this one. Constantly gets stuck in my head. Constantly gets stuck in my head every time I listen to it. That chorus is just so damn catchy. I love the use of bells. It's just such a charming song, and it very much is a very fitting song for Brian to write and sing. And even though it's got like no crazy like chord changes or hooks, it's just so damn catchy. So I'm a big fan of it. Definitely my favorite on side two by a long shot. Um, oh, what? How many songs are on this album? Like 10? Probably up my upper five.
11. There's 11 songs.
Yeah, I'd say it's about top five. I think there's a lot of great songs on this record, but so this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree with you, Riley, that it's catchy as hell. It definitely has some earworms, that's for sure. But I also agree with Jake that in terms of songwriting, it's not the most memorable song on its own. I think if I heard the song just played on a piano and voice type of thing, I may not totally remember it, but with the impact of the production and the really zany and creative arranging, it ultimately becomes like a memorable listen and a memorable record. And Brian's harmonies and it's all of that is really fun. But as a song itself, it's just sort of standard Brian Wilson affair. But it took me probably a few listens to really be able to remember the melody and remember sort of how it went. But it's a fun song.
So production elevates it for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We all have like certain songs on here where we're like, yeah, musically, I don't think it's like too crazy, but like I love the production. And there's other ones where we're like, I think the songwriting's really good. So it's interesting. We all kind of have like different positives, for each song, So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes to what you want out of music. Some people are big
Mhm.
on melody and production, and some people are big only on lyrics. So it can be the most boring sounding song in the world, but if the lyrics are a poem, then it's amazing.
Right. Yep.
It's kind of like like I feel like Love You or let's say Beach Boys Today are very cohesive because all the ideas were coming from one creator. But I do
Hmm.
think the reason where everyone sort of has a different take on this album is because there were so many like cooks in the kitchen, a lot of people
Yeah.
writing and producing, and therefore it's a lot less cohesive. And even song to song, the production varies and the songwriting quality varies. But you gotta hand it to this album for being entertaining.
All right. So the closing track on the album is Rio Grand. So this is another Brian and Andy Paley written song. So this is definitely the most experimental track on the album. And I'd also say that it's probably the most reminiscent of some of Brian's more experimental tracks from the mid 60s, like on Pet Sounds and Smile. This song itself, it's an 8 minute long suite. And it kind of has like that old Western sound to it, kind of like songs like Cabin Essence and Heroes and Villains. I know that a lot of fans of Brian and this album really love this track, but honestly, I've never been the biggest fan myself, even after re listening to it this week. I think that the arrangement is pretty neat, and it does really capture that old Western sound well. You have all those cool sound effects and instrumentation on this. But musically, I can't say that it does a whole lot for me. There are a couple of sections that I really like. Specifically, the I want the river to take me home. I love that section. I could listen to that on repeat. And then also the section after that, the Night Bloomin' Jasmine section, I really like that quite a bit too. But honestly, the rest of it, I do kind of struggle with it. That said, I will admit though, I'm also not the biggest fan of Smile, and there is still some material from that record that I also struggle with to this day. So it might just be a taste thing for me. But yeah, again, I do want to reiterate, I don't think this is a bad song by any means, and I can totally see what Brian was going for with this. But for me, this one just hasn't really clicked as a whole, and I'm not sure I really see it clicking anytime soon. I think there's parts of it that I really like, but as a whole, it doesn't really work for me.
So for me, I do appreciate how experimental it is. I do agree with you. The Night Bloom and Jasmine, by far my favorite part of the thing. I do appreciate certain sections of it. I kind of get where they're going thematically. The problem I have with it is it's kind of this weird mix of trying to be both like an ambient track and like trying to have like elements that are a little bit more melodic. And while I do appreciate ambient music, I like to keep them separate. I'm not the biggest fan of trying to like mix and match, and especially like if
Mm.
my opinion the song is just stretching for 8 minutes and there's maybe like only a couple minutes that I really click with. So like again, I respect it for what it is, but I'm not the biggest fan of it either. I know we're probably gonna get flamed for this in the comments. Sorry. Just
I know.
Yeah, I think Jake and I have the same exact opinion on this song. I think that we each like the parts that we like. The River So Deep and Wide part and the Night Bloom and Jasmine part, that part, gorgeous. I think the second half of the track is really great, but
Mhm.
I just kind of feel like they're kind of forcing the whole look, it's Smile again kind of thing.
Yep, I hear
It's
that too. I thought.
very forced, and I don't know if that was a Brian decision, a Landy decision, a Russ Titleman decision, whoever. But I feel like if he was able to put more work into the song and condense it a bit and flesh it out a little bit more in the parts that probably needed it, it would have been a lot better, especially as like a 4 minute, maybe 5 minute song. But there's no reason this thing needs to be 8 minutes. I think they were trying to force in some parts that would make it sound experimental and cool. That being said, it is enjoyable in the parts that I really like. I actually don't mind that little Rio Grande, Rio Grande. I kind of like that part. I think that would have been a really great like bridge part if he was kind of going for that heroes and villains thing. Make that like a bridge or something, a little like short little interlude, and then you get to go into the other parts of the song. But I think it should have been fleshed out more, maybe structured a bit differently, and not 8 minutes. But it has parts that I really like though. I just kind of wish it wasn't so forced.
Well, I will always and forever die on this hill that I freaking love this song, if you want to call it that, so damn much. And it's very kaleidoscopic in the way that it paints all these different pictures. And gosh, it's just so creative. And I've said this about a couple Beach Boys songs before, whether it was Cool Cool Water or this and that. But to me, it's like a Sonic Disneyland ride, and you can just listen to it, and it will take you on an adventure and take you to all these different places. And man, my buddies and I used to just close our eyes and listen to this song, totally not under the influence of anything, and just listen to where it took us, and try to imagine all the things that it was describing. And I literally, when I think about this song, I picture things in my mind because it's so evocative that when I listen to this song, I feel like I'm on a journey in the West, and all the nature and all the things in the song. It's just so cool. I really like how advanced the production is. It makes a really cool use of panning and like stereo effects, which really makes you feel like you're inside of this inside of the song or inside of a landscape, because the music just surrounds you. And I like the use of sound effects with like the thunder and the rain and the Indians and all, all the sound effects that come and go in the song. I think it's just so brilliant and so creative. And this is one that I will just revisit all the time and be astonished when I listen to it. So to me, it totally, in my mind, almost accomplishes what Smile set out to do in 8 minutes. So I just love it. I could rant and rave about it until the sun came up tomorrow. I love it.
Yeah, Nate, I will say I think if I had more of the like a producer background like you do, I think I'd probably appreciate this more. And I do still like the production. I think that's the part of the song I do like. What I
Good.
just struggle with is just, the some of the musical elements of it just don't fully click with me. And Riley, to answer your question, I think I did read one of the producers. I think it was what was his name? Lenny Waronker was one of
Warnicker, yeah.
he kind of pushed Brian to like write something that was like more experimental. He was like, forget the pop ditties and the pop songs. We have to like write something like that. I know like you used to write like in the mid '60s and stuff. So I guess like this was kind of the result of that. So I do agree with you. It does feel a bit forced. It just kind of like it feels like we're just gonna keep going through all these different sections and stuff. But I also see like where Nate's coming from. I do like kind of your comparison of like it being almost like a Disney ride where you're going to like different sections and stuff as you go
Yeah,
through
that's
the song.
totally what it's like.
Yeah, it's
I could
like
like I'd like to picture this like with on like something like that, or almost even like if someone like just synced up a video to this, of like the different like the Western landscape that the song's trying to paint. I think I'd appreciate it more, if it was like paired with something else. But just by itself, listening to it, the song as a whole doesn't really like click with me. So
or
Matt,
maybe
you're like a Disney fan, right?
yeah.
Imagine this as like the soundtrack to like the Rivers of America, Liberty Bell part of Magic Kingdom or Disneyland. That's always what I picture in my head. Or Pirates of the Caribbean, where the boat takes you through all the scenery changes. That's always what I imagine when I listen to this song.
That does actually sound like an interesting idea, but I was gonna say I think what we are missing, Jake, is maybe we need to be under the influence of some substance to really get.
we're just like, I want the river to take me home.
Oh, but no, I think
I've been there.
I like that analogy, Nate. Where yeah, I think that this would be kind of a cool like amusement ride kind of thing, like almost you put it in like Epcot or something that like takes you through like
Yeah.
Americana and stuff like that.
Brian Wilson's Rio Grand.
Also the da 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 part
Smile.
totally it's like a callback to
Fire.
the Woody Woodpecker. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yep. I heard that too. All right, so now we've wrapped up the album. We do want to talk a bit about some of the extra tracks and B-sides that Brian recorded around the time. So Riley, do you kind of want to lead that discussion and go through some of these songs?
Let's start with a classic. Um, let's go to heaven in my car. Um, Banger. Enough said.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. This is one I remember too that like I had heard it a few years ago, either on Spotify or probably maybe on the Beach Boys station, and I remember it didn't do a whole lot for me then. But then Riley reintroduced it to me last year. He was like, "This is a banger," and I re-listened to it, and I was just like, "Yes, it is. Like this song freaking rocks." It is really cheesy. The production is very 80s, so I totally get why some people don't care for this one, but I can't
Yeah.
help but enjoy it. I really like the verses. You got like the cool like keyboard sound, and then you got the rocking guitar during the chorus. Honestly, like lyrically and musically, this kind of reminds me. It's like almost like a precursor to another Brian Wilson Carr song that was coming down the road. So I really prefer that one to this one, but this is a guilty pleasure for me. I know people shit on this one. I think
It's not
wasn't
guilty.
it wasn't it I believe it was nominated for one of those golden raspberries for
That's
worst original
horseshit.
song, and which I think is actually makes it even more funny, the song, like listening to it.
For what
But
it's worth. All right, can I talk about the Raz for a minute? Here's me putting the film hat on. They are basically like professional trolls. I mean, you want to know what won the worst song that year? It was, um, okay, that was the year. It was "I Want Your Sex" by George Michael, which was in Beverly Hills Cop 2. That is not a bad song. The year before was "Love or Money" by Prince from Under the Cherry Moon. Not a bad song. It's just because Under the Cherry Moon is not a great movie. Anyway, going back to this, yeah, no, very fun song. I really like it a lot. Very enjoyable. Kind of nice. I know this was pretty much the last Brian Wilson Gary Usher song ever released because he died not too long after this came out, right?
yep.
I believe so. It's from Police Academy 4, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. But yeah, I think it's a really fun song. It's a banger. It's catchy as all hell. It's just a fun time. I mean, anybody who's shitting on this just doesn't like fun, I guess, or they just,
Or
Well,
they or like Police Academy 4.
I really like the beginning. I love the way that the car comes in. I don't know if that's supposed to be a callback to what was it? 409 or Shutdown.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
where they literally recorded a car on the road. I love how you get like those heavenly, like angelic voices, and it's just like so many times I get that helpless feeling. And that chorus, man, it's too catchy for its own good. And it's just so much fun, and it's classic Brian Wilson charm. Like, how can you not enjoy this? Like, and the guitar, oh my God, how can you not enjoy this song? How
Yeah.
can you enjoy it?
One of the lyrics of all time. Yeah, it's time for body contact.
I don't give a fuck about that, man. It's so much fun.
Oh, dude, it enhances the
Hugging
song.
the curbs, hugging the curbs.
I enjoyed the song more for how cheesy the lyrics are. So
you even see me
Yeah,
like,
whenever you get Gary Usher and Brian Wilson together on a car song, all the way back to 409 and a bunch of songs afterwards, you know it's gonna be a banger.
That's all you have to say, Nate.
Yeah,
and
enough said.
Yeah. One of the other ones I wanted to talk about, do we want to get into the Wilson project since we're on with Gary Usher?
why don't we go over a few of the extra like Brian Wilson 88, a couple of the B sides and stuff, and then we can get into that.
well, the B side to this was "Too Much Sugar," which
Yeah, man, that's just Ding Dang Volume 6.
yet another song about eating healthy and not eating junk and whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
and you can
does.
very much tell which ones they actively chose to leave off the record.
This is
Uh,
one that I believe Landy wrote, maybe.
I mean, it just feels like what's that one
Got that
song?
Landy touch.
What's
Yeah.
that one song? "Help Is on the Way." It feels like "Help Is on the Way."
Yeah, so that's what it
Yeah,
reminded me of. But
and
like,
life is for the living.
I had to compare them, like, because they're both like health songs. I'll take that one any day over this. This is just like
I'll take
whatever.
that one. I'll take that one too, because this one's just talking about like don't eat this because it'll go to your thighs or
Got
something.
sugar and mama's in the kitchen with shortening,
That's
shortening.
kind of sound like shortening bread, actually. Now you mention it.
I remember my dad heard this one on the Beach Boys station when he put it on because he listens to it like just to like tell me his thoughts on certain songs, and he was like, I heard this song called "Too Much Sugar," and I was just like, oh God. So, he didn't like it either. I was not surprised.
What the
I
hell?
don't know, I feel like whenever I tuned into the Beach Boys radio station, it would be like Barbara Ann or When I Grow Up or Be True to Your School. And then when family members or people I know would tune in, it would be the most random, like Whistle In or Cease to Exist or this. People always be like,
Baby.
what the hell are you listening to?
Yeah, I've heard "Won't Somebody Dance with Me." I've heard it more
Oh,
on that
Oh yeah, I
station.
heard that one on the station too.
If I played that song around somebody, I would be like slinking in my seat, like trying to like hide my like embarrassment.
see, I just wouldn't play the song for somebody.
So another B side, he couldn't get his poor old
Yeah, I was
body.
about to mention that one. That's the Lindsey Buckingham co-write. And
It's
if you
another it's another rewrite. It sounds like the Do Run Run.
Yeah, and if you hear like if you imagine Lindsey Buckingham's vocal on it, you could just tell I think that was a
What?
collaboration that could have went really well. especially since Lindsey Buckingham has some banger tunes, especially
Yep.
like pop tunes. Like Holiday Road's like my go-to one. Well, I'm talking like solo career strictly. There was something that could have happened. I just, again, it feels like the wrong place, wrong time. It just didn't really work out. Then there was the other one. Was it Being with the One You
Yeah.
Love?
With
Speaking
the
with the one
B-side
you.
to Melt Away, which I think honestly that's probably the best of the B-sides.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like that one quite a bit.
I do.
I really like the verses on it. So I wouldn't have minded that one actually being on the album. I could have.
I was gonna say I would have slid it in on instead of nighttime. I would have put
Yep.
it in nighttime's
Yep.
place.
I agree.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one a lot too. That's the only B-side for me that really clicked. I was like, this is the one B-side that I think is up to par with some of the best material on the record. Because like Too Much Sugar and Couldn't Get His Poor Old Body to Move are just kind of they're B-sides. You know, there's like a joke that sometimes the B-side is obviously a B-side. This is prime examples of B-sides obviously being B-sides. Whereas like Being with the One You Love is when I think of like an Oasis B-side or like a Prince B-side where it's like something that's like, hey, this is like a hidden gem.
There's one other track that Brian. It was an official release from around the time. And we'll kind of segue this into our Gary Usher discussion, but the song "Living Doll Barbie."
Oh yeah,
Riley, do you know any of the background on that? I know it was released as part of a partnership with what was it, Mattel?
Mattel.
Yeah,
That's about all the background I have, honestly.
Well, it's funny too because they could have done the Barbie from all the way back from what was it,
yes,
1961? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I like this one.
Yeah, I
Not
don't
as
think the
like a
melody's that
serious,
bad, man. The
not
melody's
as like a
it's pretty
serious
good.
piece of, yeah, not as like a serious piece of music, not on the level of Melt Away or Love and Mercy, but as like a Beach Boy-ish kind of tune and the whole aspect of the tie-in with Barbie. It would have actually been cool if they did like a this on the A side and then the Beach Boys Barbie on the B side or vice
oh yeah,
versa.
They probably didn't have the rights though to the Beach
Yeah,
Boys.
that's
hmm
probably why.
I think Hype Morgan always held the rights to those songs because I know that there was a lot of legality and stuff around like the Hype Morgan.
Jim Murphy could tell you all about it.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that again. We have another video on that. But yeah, I like it a lot too. It's a pretty solid melody. Wasn't this credited as the Beach Boys though, like on like the promotional record? I'm pretty sure it
I
was.
believe it was, yeah.
That's the one I
yeah.
found on YouTube, and they said that I think the description of the video basically said something like, first of all, it's like I recorded this off a wobbly disc, that's why it sounds the way it does, which I thought was funny. But then they said something like, I cannot confirm there's any involvement from any of the Beach Boys other than Brian. So
hmm Yeah, I'm kind of with you guys on this one. I think it's a really catchy melody. Like you said, nothing too deep or musically like crazy, but I think it's a fun little song. I will say I do prefer the original version of this, which was Christine. I think that was a Brian and Gary Usher collaboration. I do prefer that one because if you listen to that one, it's like the same, melody, like Christine. But I like the arrangement more on that one. You got like this cool little synth line or keyboard line during the verses, which is not there on the Barbie version. And I just think I think the production is a little bit better on that version. So if I do come back to this song, it would be the Christine version over the Barbie version. But both have their charm. So other lyric of all time, "Hey Barbie, you are yummy like ice cream."
oh, that's the one lyric that when I heard that I kind of cringed.
I was thinking like, oh, Matt's gonna love that one.
I mean, like I said, I came around. I've even come around a bit to Male Ego, and you know how much I hated those lyrics the first few times I heard that song. So I'm used to it at this point.
Chase those tasty ladies.
In our 80s, doing it in our 80s.
They're still doing it. That's right.
I will start with my personal favorite. We're gonna get into the Wilson Project, which is just a bunch of like assorted tracks that Gary Usher and Brian wrote with varying qualities and I guess productions and arrangements. Some of them are just like strictly demos, and some of them are damn near complete. My personal favorite would be Heavenly Bodies, which I thought that was an incredible song. I'm surprised that did not really make it past what it did. I think that totally should have been on the Brian's solo record. It sounds so complete. I love the saxophone on it. It's kind of like Brian doing like style council music, like the 80s like sophisti-pop, and it sounds so good. And I really wish we got more of that. We didn't, but I really wish we did. And it sounds incredible, and I will do a lot of things to get like a complete super clean version of this somewhere on streaming because I think it's so damn good.
Out of that
Yeah,
batch, I really love the spirit of rock and roll.
Yeah, we know you do, man.
That one is such a lost classic in my opinion.
I wanted to add to Riley. I really liked Heavenly Bodies too. That was the standout for me as well. I will say, like Brian's falsetto on it, I could see how that could be a little off-putting for somebody. It's definitely not his '60s falsetto by any means, but I thought the song itself was like really good, and I like the sax solo as well. I thought that it was incorporated well into the song. So for me, I'm with you, Riley. I would have liked that to get an official release somewhere, even as like
Magnetic Attraction was also pretty good. That's another one that kind of sounds like
yeah.
sophistopop, like Paul Weller. They sound like this very specific track called by the Blow Monkeys called "Digging Your Scene." I think Jake sent me
I
that,
love that freaking song.
and they both kind of give off that vibe. So Magnetic Attractions and Heavenly Bodies, both awesome. It's definitely the sax that kind of gives it that like sophistopop vibe, but both are I think are very great songs, and I wish we got some sort of release. I prefer Heavenly Bodies. I really wish we got a release of that, man. Because I don't know. I feel like they really did a great job on those, but unfortunately, no.
Matt, something interesting about Magnetic Attraction. You might have saw this if you listened to it or went on the YouTube video, but the singer on the recording that I heard of it, because it's not Brian, it's this guy Tom Kelly, who wrote songs for Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, and quite a few other artists in the '80s. I think
Oh,
Whitney Houston as well. So I was like, oh, Matt would love that little fact there.
you're talking about Tom Kelly and I think Billy Steinberg. They wrote songs like a Virgin,
Yep. That,
Colors, I think Eternal Flame for the Bengals, and I believe So Emotional for Whitney Houston.
They
Uh,
weren't co-writers on that track, were they?
no, I think Jake is just saying that the version he heard was Tom Kelly doing the vocal.
Oh, got it.
recording of Magnetic Attraction, they have Tom Kelly. They said it was like a loose lead vocal, so like he was just like doing the vocal just to like get an idea of like how the song's gonna go for future release. But I
Right, yeah.
I liked his vocal on it. I actually think I probably would like the song more with him singing it than Brian's voice on it, just because I think it kind of adds to that kind of sophistopop sound that Riley's talking about. So
I got the whole list here. So their number one hits that they wrote, some bangers here. Madonna's Like a Virgin, Cyndi Lauper's True Colors, Hearts Alone, Whitney Houston's So Emotional, and the Bengals' Eternal Flame.
yeah, that's a lot of hits.
A lot of hits, some of the best songs, some of the best pop tracks of the '80s, for my money.
All right. Oh, Riley, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I mean the rest for the Wilson project are just kind of like knickknacks and stuff. There's definitely some finished tracks, but of the ones that I thought were worth mentioning, besides the ones we already talked about, I literally like Christine was pretty good, but obviously
Yeah.
that turned into a little dull. Heavenly Bodies and Magnetic Attraction, man, those are bangers. I really wish we got more of those. And the rest, there's a book that's out there that I would actually really like to get. I think it's called The Wilson Project, and it's like daily like journal stuff entries or whatever of the day by day workplace environment, and it has a lot of stuff on Landy, which is probably only like big turn off because just don't really like him and you don't really want don't
Yeah.
he's been talking to death. Don't give him the time of day. But yeah, wish we got more, but
Yeah. Nate, there is that song from the Wilson Project, "Just Say No."
Yeah.
Pretty,
The obligatory Brian Wilson health related song.
yeah. No,
He's
say no to drugs. Say no.
Hitching his train to the Reagans, because that's what
Yeah,
that was.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, it's funny too because Brian got in trouble for
At the RNC,
bringing
right?
bringing drugs to the RNC. So maybe he wrote this song as a follow-up to that incident.
forced to write
yeah.
this.
I knew there was a funny backstory to it. That's why I wanted to bring it. Yeah. Before we wrap up, I did want to briefly go over some of the critical reception that this album received. So, Brian Wilson 88. So at the time, it received mostly positive reviews. Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars. The LA Times gave it 5. Rolling Stone's David Frick wrote that Brian Wilson is a stunning reminder of what pop's been missing all these years, and the Beach Boys' best long player since 1970 Sunflower. Not sure I agree with that, but with his only criticism being that the LP appeared to lack a real statement of direction or purpose. Not sure I really agree with that either. I think that it is a pretty cohesive album, but whatever. In the magazine Stereo review, a writer wrote that Brian Wilson, the album confirms that the artist had successfully delivered Pet Sounds 2 and was clearly at work again with talent intact. There was a more critical review from the AP, who wrote that Brian Wilson can't compare with any of the early 60s Beach Boys classics. And then a People writer wrote that the record was often appalling. So obviously they weren't a big fan. Some retrospective reviews have been a little bit more critical, mostly for the production, just because like it does definitely date the album to the 80s. So I think really if you don't like that style of production, and we kind of talked about this with Beach Boys 85 as well, if you're not really into that kind of production, then these albums might not be for you. AllMusic wrote that while Wilson retained his gift for catchy melodies and dense symphonic production, there was a forced stiffness to both the songwriting and execution. Much of the blame for the album's mixed success can be laid upon its sterile, synthesizer-laden arrangements and echoing percussion, which epitomize some of the less attractive aspects of late 80s production. And then Rolling Stone Album Guide also kind of ripped on the album and said that the dated synth-heavy production makes the record almost unlistenable. But they did admit, too, though, that the songwriting has not abandoned him completely. And they shouted out the songs Love and Mercy, Melt Away, and Baby Let Your Hair Grow Long. So I think they're on the same page as me and you, Riley, on that.
It's kind of interesting that 80s sounded kind of dated in like the 90s and 2000s when things got really dry again. But now all the synths and the reverb and all the hallmarks of the 80s has come back so much with The Weeknd and artists like that to the point where this album doesn't even sound dated anymore. It sounds more modern than it did maybe 5 or 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy.
You know how it is. All trends are cyclical. So like, yeah, like you said, like The Weeknd and like Chapel Roan and all that, they're kind of bringing back that sound.
Yeah, Chapo is another good example.
Yeah.
Jake, you want me to read Christ God's review? I have it open.
Yeah, just read it.
Oh, here we go.
It's not that long. Don't worry. It's not that long. Gave it a B minus. He said, what made Brian's utopian fantasy so believable was the guileless hypocrisy of the simpleton's fate and family tied him to. His shy, sincere, goofy, subtly tortured lyrics took off from the cheerful hedonism of the Beach Boys' secular chorals and white boy soul. Solo, the pain in his voice is all too unmediated, and he isn't deep enough to make something of it. He sounds like the sincere, talented, mildly pretentious nut he is. What's more, his multi-produced $1 million return is weighed down by a collective Phil Spector obsession. Comes off incredibly labored. Of course, Sma was probably kind of overwrought too. Also, Nate, I will say, Kreisgau is not the biggest Spector fan. He one time said something like Spector. I don't know if Spector was necessarily all positive for rock music or something.
Yeah, I recall.
So, I mean, it sounds like a pretentious Kreisgau review. Nothing I haven't read before.
Now that's how his reviews read. He's just very pretentious.
It's very pretentious.
He's a rate your music guy before rate your music.
Yeah,
for real.
The inventor, the OG.
Yeah. But they're fun to read sometimes because it's just to see what together.
All right, we will wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for listening to this 51st episode of Good Timin. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a really fun time discussing Brian Wilson 88 with you guys, and I hope that our discussion has helped give some of our listeners a greater appreciation for the album as well. So as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the Good Timin podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So
many places.
What's that?
There's so many places.
There's so many.
There's so many places to
listen to Good Timin
podcast.
We will wrap it up there, though. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Love and mercy.